Good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday. It's the 20th of September already. Yep. We got a long weekend on the way soon. You're just going to make it through Thursday and Friday. You'll be there before you know it. Right, Ryan?
Yes, it's come quick. It's really come quick. I don't know when last we've had holidays. We've had a few, but now it's been a while. So it's nice.
you were away last week, and like it feels like it was ages ago already. So I don't know.
I know.
Maybe everybody has a different experience of time. It's so bizarre. It's like if you're having fun, it always seems like it's going much too fast.
Exactly.
If you're not having, it seems like it's dragging really badly. Did you have wind at your house last night? Because my God, there was like a gale force cyclone type wind here at my house. I saw the trees bending double. It brought on a storm front, which had 10 drops of rain, which is a bit disappointing. But you know how Bakabunja keeps going on about the end is nigh? Well, holy shit.
He won't shut up about it.
I know. Well, maybe he's got a point, or maybe everybody always feels that way when crazy weather happens. But honestly, like last night, and I'm sure the people in the comments will say the same thing, it wasn't nice. I was looking outside, just waiting for a tree to be pulled out of the ground or something like that. It was really hectic. I haven't seen.
I heard you guys had a tree fall this side while I was away.
Oh yeah, very exciting. Things that keep us awake at night, we had a tree fall. It was terribly exciting. I looked at the comments this morning. So here we got Francois listening from South Sudan, which is bloody amazing. We've got awesome. Leanne, who's listening in Perth, Australia. She's doing the house cleaning this morning, and she says she's de-weeding her paving today while she's listening to us. So she's busy. And Nat Wacko is listening to us from Canada. So that's just, there's 3 places. You couldn't wish for more disparate places than that. All with us this morning. Isn't that cool?
That's fantastic.
Right? I think it's bloody amazing. I really do. Gijs also agrees that the wind was hectic in Pretoria. So yeah. And Bakabantu's loving this.
Yeah, I know. There he is.
He's like, you see, I was right. A lot of source material lately for his end is nigh argument. Yeah, it's becoming a stronger argument. I hate to admit it. What can I tell you?
I got cornered. Did I tell you when I was at a braai last week, I got cornered into a very weird religious discussion, which I try and keep far away from. But this time I was kind of put into a corner about it.
Yeah.
And I was asked if I'm religious, number one, and if I'm not, when am I going to do the right thing? Because the time is coming.
Oh, wow. So these people basically saying we're all about to die. The end times are near.
The end time is near.
Right. And then they tried to pressure you into conversion.
Well, I don't know if they were pressuring me into conversion. They were just like, dude, when this thing happens, what are you gonna do? And I was like,
do you start to engage with people like that, or you just try and get away as quickly as possible?
I try and get away, but for some reason that night I was like, you know what? It was the first time I met this guy. I was like, I don't want to blow him off, so let me just have this conversation. And I actually called it outright, and I was like, what are you on about? And he told me about some river that either 4 angels or 4 demons were buried under.
Oh my God.
It was said in the Bible, apparently, which has been edited many times, that this river needs to stay full in order for the demons or angels or whatever to be buried underneath. And right now it's drying up, hence the fires. And I was like, oh God, what are we going on about?
In the absence of a logical explanation for stuff, people will always choose mystery and nonsense. And to expect that a dried up river is a sign of God's anger. That would be like me saying, well, the wind last night is a sure sign that God is angry with me. How about you realize that Earth has been here for billions of years before humans came along, that it will be here for a couple of billion years before the sun eats us all up and burns everything to a crisp. and that none of this is related to your organic existence, and that you stop being so full of yourself that you think everything's a sign from the creator, the higher power,
Yeah.
designed you. Like the whole world, the whole universe, everyone else on planet Earth who's not clearly privy to the signs that you think you are, everything that's going around, uh, galaxies swirling, gravity working, um, heat and pressure and chemistry of the highest order, the four great forces. All of this is designed so that you can be around at a time where a river dries up and the end of the world comes. Yeah, that's highly likely.
No,
I'm
I
sure
know.
that, but you don't want to get into those discussions sometimes because
Oh,
maybe everybody's having a fun time and people are, relaxing, having a drink together. They've had a hard week at work. They've got problem. People have got problems, man, and
no, they do.
to then have to spend your day arguing with people about stuff like that, where they are so convinced that they are right, and that they know something that you don't. It's just not worth getting into. I mean, you're asking for just unhappy, nasty things.
You would hate to know where it segued, though, that whole conversation.
Where did it go?
It segued into NATO or
Hmm.
BRICS. And I was like, God, guys,
All right.
is this what you're talking about at Bry's now? Like,
This is what happens. Is like these are the subjects, and I have modified my position on religion because I'm a lot more understanding, tolerant. I'm a lot less militant atheist than I ever was, right? Because I think I was pretty unpleasant, and I think I upset a lot of people unnecessarily just by being so strident about my views. And actually, it's an ugly thing when people are too strident about their views, especially when it's stuff like religion, which people are going to argue about. But it is amazing that it's a pedestrian subject. In other words, there's a low barrier to entry for religion. I mean, you can be a total ignoramus and you can just glean the absolute basics. In fact, you could flip open your Bible on any given page, read a line, interpret it in one of a million ways, and convince yourself in your head that you've some amazing insight that everybody else has missed.
yeah,
And there's no way to, what do they call it? It's unfalsifiable. So there's no way you can actually get to an answer that makes perfect sense. And the same goes for politics. We talk a lot of politics in this show. And I have to admit, in my spare time, I'm doing less and less of that. In fact, I consider it a real relief when I'm around people who we don't have to talk politics.
yeah.
You know, it's not something that gives me joy. There's nothing we can do about it as individuals. And it's not
And
as
like,
if there's some easy, short, quick secret code. Politics is complicated because it's a bunch of people trying to get on with each other, trying to live together, trying to make society work. And some of those people have good intentions and some of them have bad intentions. But the reality is, there isn't a correct answer in politics. In other words, you may think you know about NATO, you might think you know about the Ukraine and Russia conflict. We all have different opinions on that. Not all opinions on this are equally valid, it's worth saying.
yeah,
But the only people who really know what is going on are the people on the ground fighting, or the leaders who are commanding those troops, or the politicians who are commanding the leaders of those troops. And even they only get a small window on the actual whole conflict, because there's people don't tell the truth. They all have their agendas. It's just not worth getting into these things. I would rather talk about fun stuff and laugh
exactly.
and make good memories. And especially on your weekend, and for you, it was like your birthday week, to have to
Yeah.
stand there, like argue with people about Russia and the Ukraine. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it can be very entertaining if you're in the mood for it. But I find, I don't know about you, less and less, it's the thing I want to do in my spare time.
It also just divides the room. Like, and
Oh,
that's the problem with it, is because all these people gathered together for one reason. And then they
right.
ask you a dumb question like that. And no view is going to, like, unless everyone is agreed to the same party or the same principle, which is never the case, no one's gonna everyone's gonna assume what kind of person you are based off the party or the idea that you voting for, and then they're gonna find fault with it, and it brings up the
Yeah.
stench in the room where everyone just kind of divides into their groups.
Well, I mean, that's what happens in America now. Anytime you mention politics, because families get divided,
Oof.
friends stop talking to each other. People are moving, they're literally moving from one state to another because their politics are so divisive.
Yeah.
And you can't say I'm making that up, because you can actually see the population dynamics happening in real time in America. People are moving out of certain states into others. They're going out of some cities into other places, and it's happening because it's just becoming impossible for people to live together. They don't even share the same values anymore. America, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, for close on 280, 300 years, has been something that's held people together. They've all kind of gone, yeah, you know what, we might disagree about a few things, but this is the stuff we have in common. And that isn't even happening anymore. Just quickly to go back to where everybody is, because this is amazing. Here's Jim in England. Here's Tony
wow.
in Oklahoma City. Here's Saint in Switzerland. I mean, there really is SM in Dubai, sitting in traffic in Dubai. And then I love this. Carl is like, I'm all the way in Edenvale fighting off the lesbians.
He's in the worst place ever.
Oh man, that is hilarious. You see where they're everywhere. I love this about the show. We really are getting people joining us in different time zones, totally different worlds. It's bloody amazing, right?
Yeah.
It really is. There's some. Is the river that you're talking about the Tigris, the Euphrates?
I think the Euphrates sounds familiar. I'm not sure if it's that one, but
those two rivers run through Mesopotamia, which is the old, the land of the Assyrians, the land of the Babylonians, the land of the Persians later. I mean, it's a fascinating place. Probably the original cradle of humankind.
yeah.
And if you are a biblical scholar, the supposition is that is the land of Eden. That's where men started to farm, started to settle in cities, started to build permanent dwellings, all of that stuff. And you can find cities like which is where Abraham was born. That's how old that area of the world is. It's a fascinating place. I mean, there's ziggurats there, which are these step pyramids that were built to honor the kind of pre-monotheistic gods of Mesopotamia, Marduk and that kind of thing. And these were supposedly the inspiration behind the Tower of Babylon, too.
Sure.
Tower of Babel being something that was reaching up into the sky to try and get to God,
Have you ever gone to any of these cities like Israel and just gone to
Israel's a country, but yeah, I know what you mean.
I mean, sorry.
So Mesopotamia, I'd love to go to Mesopotamia. It's modern day Iraq though, so you don't want to go there. Not now.
But are you fascinated by the biblical stories to go and follow and check out the actual?
I think anybody, even if you're not a religious person, I mean, yeah, I've got books behind me. Here's a book on the churches of like the Holy Land, which, I mean, for someone who's not, a big believer, this is the kind of stuff. Turn it the right way around. I'm like George W. Bush, who holds his book out. Like, churches of the Holy Land. I mean, this is fascinating stuff, And these are buildings. Some of them are up to 100, 150 years after the death of Christ. I mean, it's an incredible place. And Jerusalem, I mean, who isn't fascinated by the fight that is going on? Probably the world's most fought over piece of real estate in all of human history is the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, where, first of all, Solomon would have built his temple. Well, even before that, it's supposedly the site where Abraham sacrificed Isaac, or didn't, as the case may be. God stayed his hand. It's then the place of Solomon's temple, then the place of the second temple, then the place of the third temple, then the place of the Dome of the Rock, which is still there, the rock that supposedly Muhammad ascended into heaven from. This is the most hotly contested place on planet Earth if it comes to just geography, right? So anyone who's interested in history, like, this place is full of secrets and full of mystery and full of deep, deep, significant meaning for all the people who, whether they're Jews who go and pray at the Wailing Wall, whether it's Muslims who go to the temple on top of that rock, whether it's Christians who want to be as close to the site where Jesus would have gone to minister and just near there where he would have been crucified. I mean, these are like the most incredible, meaningful places to the three great religions, the three great monotheisms. So
I do find it fascinating how
I would love to see that stuff. I mean, wouldn't you?
No, the thing is, I'm fascinated by how these parables, if you will, have been carried over for so many years. You know, there isn't one. I don't want to say there isn't one, but this is the most consistent kind of book that has been carried over for years. Stories have been told that are very similar. So I find it fascinating, but yeah, I'll just be very careful before I enter into these very religious countries.
It's just sometimes not worth it. But I'm just going to say, strength to Congo Chris. Good luck with the lesbians in the East Rand. What can we say? It's Edenvale, you know? I mean, listen, we joke about you. I reckon I'll take your lesbians in Edenvale, Chris, and I'll raise you. It's not Chris. It was Carl.
It was Carl.
I'll take your lesbians in the East Rand, and I'll raise you the lesbians of Centurion. I reckon I win.
Are they worse?
No, not worse, but I think Centurion's got more of them. I mean, if you're in the market for lesbians, Centurion's a good target-rich environment. I mean, you know, if you're a girl who's into girls, I'll take you to my local builder's warehouse on a Saturday. You'll find plenty of options, you know. And I've always stood up for the lesbians, and I'm not going to stop. So those are my people, you know. Yeah, it's amazing that there are people now talking about, you know, the fall of civilizations is apparently a very good podcast. That sounds awesome. Thank you for that. That is from Congo, Chris. He says it's especially about the Assyrian and Sumerian empires that fell. Gareth, I listened to the show yesterday on my way back from work, and I must say the comedian guests are always by far the best. Even your mood improved from beginning to the end. Yeah, I mean, you were there, Ryan. I was like a bit grumpy at the beginning of the show, and then within like 10 minutes of Jason Goliath sitting down and talking to us, I was much better. And I said to him, he's got this job. He has to keep the whole country laughing. Not just him, but it's his job. And he's like, yeah, it's tough. But he was brilliant.
I mean, he's also one of the few comedians we've had on where it doesn't, I mean, I'm not judging anyone, but like, it doesn't go into a depressing kind of state. He's just funny all the time, you know? It's the one thing I love about Jason. He's even funnier in person when you meet him. Like, he just cracks these wild jokes.
I wish I'd known his wife was sitting outside, because I didn't know until we finished the show that she was sitting there with him. And we could have brought her in. I don't think she would have liked that very much, because she's not the kind of person who likes attention.
She likes to hang back, but she was laughing the whole time. Like, I know you couldn't hear it because the door was over here, but she was just in hysterics.
So the photo of Ryan and Jason that I actually put it on my Instagram last night, looks like a family portrait. Very good. So you're a Mr. Beast fan, and we actually interviewed his girlfriend the other day. I hear there's some controversy. He went to visit an orphanage in Cape Town, and he uploaded a video about the reconstruction of the Bapumele orphanage in Cape Town. He boasts about rebuilding it, but apparently somebody says that it had nothing to do with him. While he had good intentions to help, it is alleged that he ignored pleas from various humanitarian groups to stop his philanthropic stunt amid concerns that orphanages were a haven of violence, abuse, and neglect. The movement to end orphanages worldwide. I mean, this is incredible, right? So whether or not Mr. Beast actually gave them money, or, sometimes people will say, oh, well, you brought awareness to this. So I don't see the problem.
Well, this is the thing, right? So he's got, if you follow Mr. Beast, he's got his normal channel which he posts all of his entertaining content.
Mm-hmm.
And then he also has a Mr. Beast philanthropy channel, which is actually run by two South Africans. I can't remember the one, but the other one is the one I spoke to yesterday about who I want to get on.
Yeah, his girlfriend mentioned that to us the other day.
Yes, Dan Mace. Yes.
Right. Okay.
So Dan Mace is a South African YouTuber, and he makes really, really awesome videos, and he recently moved out to LA, but I don't know if he's come back because I know he's just recently had a child. So he's just taking a break off the philanthropy channel, but he's been running it for a little while. And basically, all of the money that Mr. Beast makes that he puts aside for the philanthropy channel goes into these orphanages. And for some reason, I don't know why, but they're starting in South Africa. They're rebuilding charities. They recently went to a few villages and just gave all the kids school shoes so that they don't have to walk barefoot there. And they do make videos.
So why are there these people? Why are these people saying that it's a stunt and that he shouldn't be doing this? And clearly they are anti-orphanage, and now they're making this Mr. Beast's problem. There are a lot of people in this world who do nothing,
but that's it, right?
Bitch and moan about other people who do something. Like, get off your ass and you do something. If you're going to sit there complaining about other people, but you're going to do nothing yourself, I don't want to hear from you. Thank you very much.
And everyone says, no, you shouldn't do this stuff. You should keep it off camera and you should just do it in your spare time. But the whole thing is the philanthropy channel is monetized. And so he uses that money to reinvest into the charities and into,
also, I mean, do these people clearly don't understand economics for a start? That's why they're complaining about someone who's doing, even if he's just bringing awareness. Like, let's just forget the money for a second. Let's say that he's just going there out of the kindness of his heart to show people that there's an orphanage in Cape Town. You know what'll happen? There'll be, I don't know, 1,000 people who are watching who will actually donate money to that place. They'll find out about it. There are people who do this. Once they find out about a cause that really moves them, they get involved. That's how I got involved with Headway, for heaven's sake. Someone I know took me to one of their events. They said, meet these people. I met these people. I was like, I got to get involved. Now, if Mr. Beast is the one introducing you, even if he doesn't give a cent to this orphanage, if he's the one who goes and introduces the rest of us to this Baphumelele orphanage, and even one person gets involved, donates their time, or a can of beans, or a blanket, or whatever, that's already worth it. Yeah. Now, the fact that he's got millions of people watching him and that he has this unbelievable following all over the world, he's not even from South Africa. I don't know why anyone would think that this should be his priority, but he's here. He's doing stuff, which is amazing. Yeah. And I don't understand this group that's claiming that he must stop his stunt because orphanages are bad. So first of all, they are conflating issues. First of all, if you don't like orphanages, then what you should be doing is explaining to the rest of us what the alternative is. So if you don't want an orphanage, where do you want kids without parents to go? What must happen to them? Are you suggesting that you have a better plan? If you do, please, we're willing to hear it, because I don't think orphanages are anyone's first choice, right? No one goes, wow, I wish I'd grown up in an orphanage. Said no one ever, but I don't see anything better. And in this day and age, we have a lot of kids who are abandoned. We have a lot of kids who grew up without parents. Maybe their parents both died. Something terrible's happened. They've been given up for adoption because their mom is like 16 or whatever, and she's still in school. You're not going to change all of that, and it's not Mr. Beast's fault, and it's not the kid's fault. So what do you suggest? Number one. Number two, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And number three, why are you picking on someone who's a public figure when nobody knows who you are? You see,
It's always so it's low hanging fruit. It's so easy just to pick
Listen,
on
I'm
pick on the
so
big
over.
guy.
I'm so over nobodies and bullshit people on the internet thinking that their opinion is equivalent to the opinion of people who are actually doing things in society. Whether you are just a hardworking individual going to work, earning enough to pay for your family, to live, if you're doing that, and some snotty loser on X or on Instagram starts like flinging mud at you, I always think of it this way. You know, sometimes you'll drive past like a dirty, ragged, drunk, homeless person on Nyaupe or whatever, right? I
Yeah.
can never say that word properly. And you can either stop and have a conversation with this person, which nobody should do, because what's the outcome you're looking for there?
Yeah.
Or you just get out of there as quickly as possible. It's like having an argument at a birthday party. It's not worth it. Rather just move on. And the same goes for social media. You don't need to listen to all these moron people. They are adding no value to anywhere and to anyone. So, Mr. Beast, carry on doing what you're doing. I know Ryan's a big fan. I don't care if you're doing this for good or for bad reasons. The fact that you're bringing attention to them is awesome. We'll take it. Thank
Yeah.
you. Anybody has a
Exactly.
problem with that? That's your problem, right?
He's doing more than government, so
And
we'll
we
we'll
don't know who
take it.
these people are, by the way. It doesn't say who these people are. It just says, please from various humanitarian groups. Now, who are these humanitarian groups? If they were worth anything at all, we would know their names. We would know these people's faces. We don't know who they are. They're nobodies.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, it staggers me that there are people, and I'm not grumpy, by the way, Sibu. I'm not grumpy. This is more like there are dumb things going on Earth, and it makes no sense to me that we are paying attention to the noise from the peanut gallery. You know,
Exactly.
this is a result. And one of the things I love about the internet is we can all talk and we can do what we're doing this morning, and that's great. But I come from a background of like media where you had to earn each listener's trust and you had to work for things. And it wasn't just like buying followers or clickbait or any of that shit. And to me, if you can't back this stuff up, which clearly these people can't, then I don't know what you expect people to do about that. How are you adding value in the world? Okay,
It's
let's
like
move on.
yeah.
What did you want to say?
No, I was gonna say it's like I don't know if you saw that video that went viral like a couple weeks ago where they had those protesters in the middle of the road and some Texan policeman just got in his car and
Mm.
started like almost half ramming them.
Yeah, it's
He
like
was like
environmental
tired of it.
protest. You know, they
Uh,
never come up with with solutions to the real problems. These people who will glue themselves to the road, just stop oil. They'll throw like porridge or whatever on paintings. They're just destructive. Just just you know, they want to break shit down. These people, and if you ask them a significant question, even in their area of interest, these are supposedly people so passionate about the environment that they will glue themselves to a road. And when you say to them, why are you fighting the British government, who are responsible for a tiny proportion of the world's carbon emissions? What are you doing about China and Russia? They have nothing. India, what do they have to say about that? Nothing, because they haven't thought
yeah.
about it. And if you
Mm,
haven't thought about that, why must I take you seriously? You don't have
exactly.
any strategy to stop the countries in the world, two of them, India and China anyway, that are responsible for most of the emissions. You have no plan for that, but I must take you seriously when you're fighting with Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak?
Yeah.
Come on. It's ridiculous. So, speaking of stupidity, apparently the talk shows in America are still at loggerheads with striking writers. Bill Maher and Drew Barrymore, as well as Jennifer Hudson, they were about to start their shows up again. Bill Maher hasn't done a show for, I don't know, 5 or 6 months now because of
Mm,
this writer's strike. I used to listen to his podcast every day, and he's doing his own podcast, which is from his house. But they haven't done a new real time show for months. And there's this huge writer's strike in Hollywood. They're arguing because they're saying that the entertainment industry has changed a lot. Streaming has stolen the profits from their material that they used to be paid. These people just don't seem to understand that the entertainment world has changed, right? Like Netflix and Amazon, these are the powerful entities in Hollywood at the moment. It's not the studios that used to run things. Now it's internet companies. Amazon in particular is a behemoth in that space. Anyway, these guys are like, oh, we want more money. So they've been on strike for months and nobody cares. By the way, no one's missing Jimmy Fallon or Stephen Colbert or Jimmy Kimmel. No one's missing them.
I saw that actually they're putting together a live show, and they're going to be touring the US, and they said that all the proceeds from that are going to go to the writers.
Please.
All of them are like coming together to put on this live show, and I'm like, oh.
Like if you took Jimmy Kimmel's salary for his late night show and you divided it by the number of writers he's got, and he's got a ton of writers, but they'd all get hundreds of thousands of dollars in this writer's strike, they'd all come back to work. But he won't do that. So instead, they're going to do this publicity stunt. Come on. You know what? Also, why are you listening to striking workers? Because those people who are striking are not all the people who work on the show. You know, Ryan, when you do a TV show, you've got people who do lighting, people who do sound, people who do the actual filming, people in studio making the mix, people who are editing. You've got runners, you've got guest bookers, you've got all kinds of people who are not writers, who frankly are now also out of a job because the writers demand more. I say just fire the writers. You can find new writers. And everybody else wants to come back to work, including the show hosts. I mean, Bill Maher and Drew Barrymore said they were going to start their shows up again. And then these striking writers were like, oh, no, you're not. I mean, you're being held ransom by these people. So get rid of it. I just say fire these people.
That's it, right? I mean, Drew Barrymore had an issue an apology because she was going to air, her show was going to air. It must have been already pre-recorded and ready to air. And they were going to air it. And she actually pulled it and said, I'm so sorry. I'll wait till the strike's over. But I mean, if they didn't bring it up, she wouldn't have cared.
So this relates to the story that we got into just now about this orphanage in Mr. Beast, because what's missing in society at the moment is people who are not pressured by a mob. We need people with some backbone, with some courage. And a lot of people talk a big game, like I stand up for whatever, free speech or for workers' rights or for democracy. Well, people claim these things. And when it comes to the crunch, they cower and they apologize like Drew Barrymore has. She should have said, fuck you. Like, you go and ask for more money somewhere else. I don't need you. I'll hire new writers that have never worked before. I'll give them a chance. If they're shitty at it, then I'll look like an idiot, but I'll take the risk. I'll have the courage of my convictions. But instead, she folds. She falls down like a sheep.
She folded so hard. It was.
Oh, please.
It was embarrassing.
I mean, it's just don't apologize to these people. I don't know why everybody's so scared of this online mob, because those of us who have stood up to them, and I can claim that I have, there's evidence all over the place to show that. I don't give a shit what they say. Those people are happy and successful anyway.
Yeah. I mean,
so what are you afraid of? If you're Drew Barrymore and Bill Maher, you have so much money. You have such a great life. You're not going to lose a thing by standing up to these nobodies on the internet. So why do you let them push you around? Why do you let your own writers tell you what to do? They wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for you. In the case of Bill Maher, if he didn't put that show together and he wasn't the host of that show, no one would watch it. No one's coming for your writing.
Exactly. And I mean, also, the internet's providing a big space for people these days. If any of those hosts really wanted to, if they decided to write off their contracts with the television guys, like NBC and all those guys, if they started their own YouTube channel and they got, as you said, like intern writers, they could easily get thousands of people watching on YouTube every
It
day
would cost them
if
it
they
would
really
cost them
wanted
a
to.
whole lot less. Plus,
Yes.
they could create employment. They could take new talented young people who are desperate to get into show business, give them a chance. Instead, they're being held to ransom by these like necrotic idiots who don't understand that entertainment has changed, that the whole game has changed.
And we speak about Mr. Beast, but if you look at like his business, there are
Mhm,
so many people that have left the Mr. Beast company. Now he employs over 200 people. There are
mhm.
so many people that have left, and they've all put out videos like, why I quit working with Mr. Beast. Because he's got a schedule, and if you can't keep up with it, you're off. And that's why his channel's so successful, because he doesn't take this whole thing of, if you don't want to work, then don't, and he'll find someone else. And that's why he's doing so well.
So Congo Chris is right on the money here. So right. I couldn't agree with you more. He says, here's a refreshing idea. Why don't these talk show hosts stop being shills and left wing corporate mouthpieces? Imagine a world where they told us what they actually think and not a pre approved script.
Yeah.
Well, ironically, that's one of the reasons I like Bill Maher. And he's always been one of those people who stood up to this nonsense. Clearly, now he's been pressured into folding.
Well, I mean, if you look at the case of like a Drew Barrymore, she's been in the system since she was like 14, if not
No,
younger.
6 years old, dude. She was on
6.
ET. Yeah. She was on
So
ET.
I would imagine somebody her age being in the business she's been in for so long, I don't think she knows how to do it on her own. And that's why the industry has kind of always treated her really well, and she's just gone with it. There's been no kind of downside for it, but I
Unfortunately for her,
suppose this is what
she
it
has,
comes with.
well, she's got no backbone. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Drew Barrymore seems like a very sweet person. She's like a little bit like woo woo, she kind of, you can see she's grown up and lived her whole life in entertainment. So
Yeah.
she doesn't know what real people go through. But that's not her fault. And I don't
No.
begrudge her that. But what I think is sad is that the one thing she does understand is that entertainment is a cutthroat business, and there is no time and there is no leeway given to people who are not pulling their weight. So fire the writers, stand up for yourself, get
I
back
mean,
to work. And
if you
maybe
look at
if you don't get back to work, we'll all realize we didn't need you in the first place. How about that?
I mean, we were talking about Jason yesterday, right? If
Mm.
you go speak to half of these comedians, they have to write their own shows. They don't have writers. They have to come up with all of their own stuff, all of their skits. They have to like South Africans, if we had a platform like what those guys in America have, geez, we'd never be short of writers or entertainers
I
in anything like that.
I've done what 3 or 4 TV shows, and I still had to write most of the stuff myself. So if you're going to do it, just do your own work. How
Yeah,
about you do your own work? That would be nice. Start there.
yeah.
So the 2 hilarious stories. I think they're hilarious because we were talking about like bears the other day. It came up in a conversation. We're talking about how stupid panda bears are because they really are dumb, right? I mean, so pandas they're very cute, and that's why we love them so much because they're like black and white, and they're fluffy, and they like really slow, and they're cuddly, and we've seen soft toys, but pandas are so dumb that they literally have to be coaxed into having sex so they can perpetuate the species. Now, every creature from single-celled organisms to lizards to fish to birds knows that if they want to exist, the whole point of existing is make more of yourself. And your
Yeah,
DNA is programmed to do. These fucking pandas, they don't even do that. They have to put Viagra in their bamboo shoots or whatever it is. They have to coax these things, they have to play nice music to protect them from any kind of outside influence. And they still won't have sex. The most basic thing that humans know is integral to us. All animals are driven by a sex drive and a survival drive. These stupid pandas, they're so useless. And we got into this whole discussion about how if a species like that is going to die out, then what are you going to do to stop it? It's like the dodo was so devoid of defense mechanisms. It couldn't fly. It was much bigger than a chicken, so it was good meat. And it
Yeah.
lived on this island, Mauritius, where, if sailors docked there and they were hungry, why would you go after something difficult when you just get a dodo? And they were so dumb they came right up to people. That's why they're extinct today.
Oh, they were just really friendly, or
They were stupid. They didn't know danger, and they'd never seen humans, and then they became food. And the last one was like killed in, I think, the late 1800s. So I know China is actually, because China comes under a lot of criticism on this show, rightly or wrongly.
yeah.
But China have been doing their very best to keep pandas going, and they've brought in all kinds of laws, and they've got, conservationists working around the clock to keep these stupid bears alive, and they're having some degree of success. But because they're cute, we like pandas. Other bears are fucking dangerous, like the wild black bear in North America. I mean, this thing will. Have you seen that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, The Revenant, where that bear like attacks him?
I haven't.
Oh my God! It's like when a bear attacks you, you've got very little chance of survival. Like a big angry brown bear or a black bear, or you're finished. And a polar bear is hugely dangerous. Those things are monsters.
Yeah.
And
No.
they're big. It's like standing up on its hind legs is like twice the size of a human. So this black bear was found at Walt Disney World. I mean, talk about the place where there are the most children running around.
Yeah, exactly.
You won't know what to do. So a wild black bear was found at Disney World on Monday. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission captured and relocated it before it could do any, like eat a child or whatever. But the disturbance temporarily closed a number of rides at the Magic Kingdom.
How does a bear just turn up and no one knows about it?
I don't know. They're roaming the wild.
I feel like Disney's the kind of place, I've never been there, but I feel like it's the kind of place where if you haven't paid or you're not getting in. Like if you don't have a band, they will find you, but they'll find a bear just roaming around.
Man, it's just unreal.
No, you know what? We have a lot of problems here in South Africa, but I assure you, bears are not one of them.
No, thank God. But then there's another story in the news. A family of bears broke into a Krispy Kreme donuts truck in Alaska and ate 20 packages of donuts. I mean,
feel like that's light work.
That's hilarious. A mama black bear and her cubs got a treat last week, Krispy Kreme donuts. A delivery driver left his van open while he dropped off donuts at a shop. The bears ate 20 packs of donuts and 6 packs of 3-pack chocolate donuts. So these bears went to town. And apparently, like bears will hang around the rubbish bins because they realized like it's much easier to just scavenge from humans than it is to go out into the forest and hunt something, So they come into town, and you'd wake up in the morning and like go outside with your coffee in the Alaskan winter, and it's freezing, and you're standing there with your coffee in your hands, and then suddenly you hear like a noise, and there's a bunch of fucking bears like tearing into your rubbish bins. I think that's hilarious. I mean, we have problems, as you say, but we don't have that problem. And a bear.
Imagine if bears roamed around here, because there are so many people scattered all over the country. If bears just popped up, so many people would die. Like,
oh man. So Dumi brings up cocaine bear, which we'll talk about in a second. But Sanele says a bear will come after you everywhere, on land, on water, on snow. It's a true beast. Listen, they're scary, hey? If it's black, attack. If it's brown, hit the ground. If it's white, say goodnight. Those are the different kinds of bears, according to Joe Rogan. Well, yeah, so apparently the brown one's the most dangerous one of all.
Yeah.
I mean,
you know what?
Kind of makes a good point. How long does it take you in Disney World to figure out whether someone is in a costume or whether it's a real bear?
Well, that's on the money. Are their costumes that realistic?
Yeah. Joking atheist says, it's not as dangerous as my ex-wife. I was an inch away from her. People are hilarious. Yeah. Dumi says it sounds like Cocaine Bear. Now what a movie. I mean, I did eventually go and see Cocaine Bear. And
I haven't seen this movie.
So you know what the story is.
No, I haven't seen this movie before. Cocaine
So
Bear.
story is this guy was trying to fly a cocaine package across the United States, and he was in one of those little light planes, and he realized like the cops were after him and they were going to get him at the airport, so he had to dump the cocaine.
Oh,
So
right.
he threw it out of the plane while the plane was flying, and it landed in this forest. And it was like a big bag of cocaine, like I don't know, a couple of kilograms. And supposedly, this is a true story based on true events. Supposedly, this bear then like stumbled upon this packet of cocaine in the middle of the forest and took a real liking to it, and turned for a window period of a couple of hours before it had a heart attack or whatever, because I don't know what the actual story is. But for that period of time, this was the most alpha monster killer to ever roam the earth.
Oh my
Well,
gosh.
since the at least the advent of humanity. And this thing this thing was unstoppable. Like it could literally run 10 times faster than any other bear. I mean, it exhausted itself, and it must have had the most incredible, like just jaw-dropping.
Incredible high. Yeah.
I mean, this thing was just monstrous in every sense of the word.
Weren't we discussing cocaine sharks the other day?
I love that story. Yeah. And then did you see that they're thinking of making a movie called let me just find out. Sharkalanche. It's like an avalanche with sharks. I kid you not. I'll even show you. There's a picture of it. I think it's probably bullshit, but it's worth. Yeah.
Look at
it's so hilarious, dude. This is so funny. So yeah, this is the movie poster supposedly with Tara Reid.
Oh my
Sharkalanche. Tara Reid, Shaun White, and Tim Allen. And it says Sharkalanche. Snow is frozen water. The science is sound.
Oh God.
Jesus. We'll never. By the way, we're doing a new shark series with Anthony Mederer.
Yes.
From Blind History. And that's going to be amazing. He talks about the great shark attacks of history. And I mean, this is real, like, jaw-dropping stuff if you're into sharks and you're into like stories about how people were attacked and eaten by these animals. And there's a lot of hype around it, but some of it is just absolutely terrifying. So you've got to check this out once it's ready. It's going to be very cool. And people just love sharks. I mean, look at Sharknado. Now you got Sharkalanche.
I just find like some of these people are fearless, right? I mean, when we were speaking to Anthony the other day when he was busy with it, he showed us a few of these videos, and these sharks come up out the water and they like treat them, if they're misbehaving or whatever, they like punch their nose, but otherwise they'll like stroke these sharks. And I'm like, you guys playing with your life. This is not so, I don't delve into the ocean.
I don't want to spoil any of this either, but they were talking about how you basically hypnotize the shark, and then it becomes docile, and it kind of like it wants to snuggle up. Now, I've never thought of sharks as being docile and friendly, but
exactly
that's what they're telling us in this podcast. You'll hear it. It's fascinating stuff. Ricky says, imagine Gareth finds a crocodile in his garden. I will be on the roof of my house quicker than you can.
I feel like
they can't climb.
Like Alice would go toe to toe with it, though.
Oh, sweet Jesus! She'd be eaten in one gulp.
I know.
Alice is not even capable of like being a watchdog. She's lying here at the moment. She's just sleeping. And if someone broke into my house while I was asleep, she would run up with her tail wagging and lick them. So she'd probably go straight up to the crocodile. I mean, she'd bark at it, and then the crocodile would just go. That would be the end of it. Congo Chris says, yes, crocodile. Cocaine Bear is a true story. It is. I'm imagining, says Carl, this bear with hookers and strippers at a casino.
It's going to be like one of those movies that come to life.
Yeah, it's unreal.
I promise you, if Disney made a film about that, it would be more entertaining than any Disney movie that's coming out now. So,
can we just talk about how disappointing Apple is with their latest update and their new phone? Because we
Yes.
briefly referred to this the other day, and I know you've got feelings about this. Who was someone I know was actually watching the event live. There's some people who are just like such fans
Yeah.
that they watched the actual unveiling of the iPhone 15 and what's new on iOS 17. And I mean, there's some people. I've got a friend who he always seems to get these updates. He goes and like signs up to be one of the beta testers, and then he gets these iOS updates like a month, 2 months, 3 months before, and then he knows all this stuff long before the rest of us to find out what's going on.
So Mash used to try and talk me into that, but for me, I'd rather wait for them to perfect the software because I don't want to deal with bugs when I'm trying to get through my day to day. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't make
I'm
any
with
sense
you.
to me.
I'm no genius. I'm not going to be able to sort that out if it fucks up my phone.
No, exactly. But also, I find the Apple events these days are so lame. Like before, when I was doing a test call with I was chatting to Rich Mulholland before he came on, and
Mhm.
he does a lot of is it motivational speaking or just
Oh, he
general
does.
like speaking?
His whole business is presentations, and he can talk about
Yes.
it. I mean, he's very good at putting those together. So he has so many areas of interest. He could talk about pretty much anything.
That's it. And we were discussing this, and he was saying that a lot of this kind of what he does is it's a dying thing. Like so many people are moving to the digital presentations where they record and just play it out.
Yeah.
And but he says that the stage is the one true place where you can feel if what like the audience can pick up if you're talking nonsense or if you know what you're talking about, because they'll boo you off if it's not what they want to hear. And so I brought up this Apple event because when Steve Jobs is still around, do you remember when he presented the iPhone
He was very
live on
good.
stage? It
He was
was
so good.
brilliant.
And
And he
by the
would,
way, I mean, he truly had breakthrough ideas. Apparently, he was a
yes,
monster to work for. But
I'm sure.
if you read the famous biography about Steve Jobs, and for those people who are lazy and have seen the movie, I mean,
Yeah,
he was a genius, but he was a monster as well. He was like a big brown bear, you know?
exactly. And so my whole thing is I preferred it when Apple used to actually fill up a full room of people and present on the night, not these digital recordings that they're now playing out to everyone that are like 3 hours long, explaining, why the iPhone 15 is now just basically an iPhone 14, which was the iPhone 13 and the iPhone 12, but now it's just got a USB-C port. Like, and they were forced to do it. Like, and that's the other thing. They were forced to put the USB-C port in because the European Union said if they don't conform, they're not going to put it on the shelves.
So is that why they've got a USB-C
Yes,
port?
that's
Okay, because
exactly why.
yeah, that's like the only thing that's different about the iPhone 15.
Exactly.
Why would you go and buy it? Why would you spend, and these things are expensive. I mean, what's a new iPhone 15 now? It's worth like 30,000 rand or something? Somewhere around there.
Yeah. Oh, I'd say even more now. I mean, because they've eliminated the smaller memories, so now you can't get the 128 gig anymore. So now I think it's only 256 and up, which means they're still keeping that price range. They're not dropping the price of those. Um, so
So
there's no
Steve
real
Jobs
change.
Steve Jobs overrated, says Virus. They've released new iPhones since he died. Well,
Yeah.
look, I mean, I'm an Apple fan, right? I use a lot of their products and I'm in the ecosystem. I'm trapped. There's no way out for me. I'm screwed. I have to stick to Apple, and I
I
will.
know. Same.
But I wish that we could have some truly breakthrough things happen here because like the last couple of updates have just been very ordinary. That's all
So
I'm saying.
I've heard Elon Musk is working on the Tesla phone, and I think
No,
if it came to it, that would probably be the only thing I would maybe
but
move to.
you are like the world's biggest Elon Musk fan, so you'll do anything he says.
No,
You're like
I'm fascinated because
you're a
he's
you're a disciple.
he's putting like so from what I hear, he's putting like solar panels on the phone so that you can leave your phone out in the sun and it will charge.
You
Like
need to
things
you
like that are
bring
fascinating to me.
yeah, I mean, listen. these solar panels. You need a pretty big solar panel to charge a phone. You know, it's not.
Well, yeah.
Just put a little thing here on the back, and that's enough to charge the phone properly.
Well, I'd like to see what they're going to do. But my whole thing is, what phones have become now is essentially we own walking billboards.
Mm-hmm.
You know, before phones you had to call and you had to text, but now what they've done is they've made this phone like a walking billboard. Essentially, everything you see, especially on social media, is like ads. You know.
Well, that's exactly right. We were talking about this yesterday with Jason.
And they're pushing everything to your phone. I mean, I've had 3 updates from that ESCOM app today, and you go watch all these ads, and you just realize that social media is just one big like advertising banner.
You are the product, everybody.
Exactly.
Sorry. What can we say? So Leanne says, this is interesting. This is a story like Leah Remini, who got out of Scientology. She says, I used to be an Apple person, but once you get out, you realize there's nothing special about Apple. I hardly noticed the difference having moved to Samsung Android. Ooh.
I don't know if I could say that.
Well,
because I'm so wrapped up in it.
She got out of the cult. So well done, Leanne.
Yeah, if you can.
Fantastic. Good for you. I watch the events every year, says Sanele. Oh, wow. I like the events, but they've become so bad. They're trying too hard to be PC when their stupid, ugly HODs all present. It's a mess. Well, apparently Apple made this terrible, terrible ad where Tim Cook starts having an argument with Mother Nature. And Mother Nature comes. This is an actual ad they made. I mean, whoever did this should be flogged in the public square. But apparently they've got this actress that they. No, really. So you could look it up. I refuse to play it on the show. We'll lose audience if I do.
Yeah.
But look it up. Tim Cook, Mother Nature video. You'll see it's so bad.
I'll take a look at it today.
I saw a write-up of something to do with that on one of the websites that I go to. Anyway, listen, it's almost 7:00. When we come back, yesterday, I was blown away, and I had to explain to Jane who this was because she's in town to do 2 live shows. She's actually got 4 of them, 2 in Joburg and 2 in Cape Town. Her name is Candace Bushnell. Do you know who that is? Jane obviously didn't. So if you lived in the 90s and you didn't know the show Sex and the City, and I knew the show, I knew of it, never watched it. I've never been a Sarah Jessica Parker fan, and this show was definitely designed for women. So it was not a show that I could have got into, even if I'd tried. But I know there are loads of people in South Africa who were massive, massive fans of, there were the 4 girls on Sex and the City. I had to look this up, but I remember the characters and I remember the actresses. I remember Kim Cattrall played this woman called Samantha, who was like the horny, she's constantly just trying to get laid, like a guy, but she was this blonde girl, right? Then there's Sarah Jessica Parker, who's Carrie Bradshaw. And Carrie Bradshaw, CB, is the same as Candace Bushnell, CB, the woman who wrote the columns on the City. And then there was there are 2 others, Miranda, something. She ran for some political office recently. She's a lesbian and she decided to run for political office. And then there's another one, some little mousy brown-haired girl. Anyway, these 4 women, Sex in the City, it was a breakthrough hit because all these women all over the world who wanted to be glamorous and successful and exciting and independent, and they didn't want to be like the stock standard kind of housewife character that was mostly staple for women in television. And this show took off. It was massively successful. I don't know how many seasons they did, but it was a big deal.
It was long.
Especially in New York, it was just so typically New York. Anyway, Candace Bushnell was in the studio with us yesterday. We recorded an interview with her. That's coming up just now. I think you'll enjoy it, even if you didn't watch Sex and the City, because she and I get into a couple of things about whether women are actually happier today since, feminism has given them supposedly all of these things that men had. And you'll hear there's some equivocation from her about whether things are better or worse right now. And also how New York has changed. There's a bunch of stuff. Yeah. So if you want to listen to that, that's coming up next. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back just after the break. Stick around. Ryan and I back in a second.
You told me it's over, baby. Gonna find you another lady. It's been weeks since you've been around. You keep on dragging me down and down. I'm right, beautiful, everything. You keep on dragging me downtown. I'm right, beautiful, everything. You keep on dragging me down and down. By the way, I never told you, there ain't no way I'm gonna fool you. You got me wrapped around your finger, and forever right there I'm gonna linger, baby. You got me tied up on a leash, walking up and down streets. I'm a good boy. Take me home and give me a treat. I only wanna be your pride and joy. Not right, beautiful, everything. You keep on dragging me round town. Not right, beautiful, everything. You keep on dragging me down and down.
This week on the Auto Trader podcast.
Off the top of your head, what are the biggest things that you think a car would have been like really feeling as a result of winter that as a driver you need to look out for?
The first thing that's going to go during a winter period is going to be your 12-volt battery. Winter has a massive impact on batteries in general, but if your battery is going to go, it's going to be during winter. So if your battery hasn't gone during winter and you haven't replaced it yet, chances are it might be on its way out after winter. So go and do a load test on your battery.
Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
Yep, that's just another one of our shows with Auto Trader, the Auto Trader Pod, and you can get it with George Meany, who's also regularly on our show on a Friday to update us. He's been giving us a quiz every week, and last week Simpiwe won. I don't know how, because she's been trailing behind. She came up from the rear and destroyed me and Ben. So well done to Simpiwe.
And Ben.
Okay. And Sorry. Ben. Can you believe that?
I missed out on a lot last week.
So I sat down with Candace Bushnell to discuss her inspiration behind the columns that she's written, the books she's written, how it was all picked up by television, what it's like to be a single woman in New York, even some stuff that she's not a fan of. Plus, she also shares some dating tips and tricks because she's dated guys. I mean, she's older now, but, you know, she's dated guys in their 20s right through to their 90s, she said. So she's got some interesting takes on what makes a guy attractive and what makes a guy boring. And you'll want to hear this. So I think it's pretty damn interesting. Here she is, the original Carrie Bradshaw, Candace Bushnell, who's in South Africa for 4 shows. She's doing 2 in Johannesburg on Saturday, and then she's doing 2 in Cape Town the next Saturday. So go and get your tickets. All the details are in the podcast, and we'll put them on the website too. Take a look. Well, Candace Bushnell is the critically acclaimed international best-selling author of no less than 10 books, and she continues to impress. She's got a one-man show, which is just unbelievable. She has written for all the big newspapers. She's been on the New York Times bestseller list. She received the Legacy Award at the Glamour Women of the Year Awards, and so many others. I mean, it's just such a pleasure to have her here because she's also the brains behind Sex and the City, which is probably one of the most successful ideas. It's not even just a TV show. Ideas in the modern world and what it's done for women and relationships and what it hasn't done for women and relationships. These are all things we've got to discuss. It is so great to have you here. And the real Carrie Bradshaw, I mean, that's who you are, right? This character was CB.
Yes. The character was my alter ego for reasons that I explain on my one-woman show, True Tales of Sex, Success, and Sex in the City.
So let's say this right up front because Candace is doing this show, which you can get tickets for at showtime.co.za and ticketmaster.co.za. It's Johannesburg on the 23rd of September. That's this Saturday. There are 2 shows, and in Cape Town on the 30th of September. Also 2 shows are going to be sold out. I'm pretty sure they will. And you tell all the behind-the-scenes stories, huh? You get into
a few.
Okay.
A few.
Yeah?
I tell the story of how I created Sex in the City, how hard I worked to get there, why I invented Carrie Bradshaw, and what happened to me afterward. And I play a little game with the audience, real or not real, because so many things that happened in the TV show happened in my real life, but they're either better or worse.
Wow.
Which is annoying. And Matthew McConaughey is one of the questions, as is a hot Calvin Klein underwear model.
Well,
so
I mean, you've had
I would say, ladies, brush up on your Sex in the City.
You're going to need to remember every episode. Okay, so this is
just a couple, really.
But this is a thing from the 90s, okay? And it's not too much to say that this transformed the way TV treated women and the way that women's relationships were portrayed on TV. Because up to then, it was, without being unkind to those TV shows that had come before, it was a little bit patronizing.
Yes. Well,
you changed that. I mean, the producers of the show, but your work, your columns gave them the material to be able to tell those stories far more truthfully.
Yes. And one of the things that one realizes about TV is that, in general, really up until kind of, the mid-aughts, TV is a very male-oriented business. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is run by men. It's written by men, largely.
Maybe not so much anymore. I mean, a lot of the executives now, yeah.
It's changed.
But at that time, it wasn't.
Yes, right? It's changed. It's changed a lot in the last 15 years, maybe 20 years, I would say. But Sex in the City was one of the first original TV shows that was on HBO. It was Arliss, and then Sex in the City, and then The Sopranos. So in some ways, Sex in the City really contributed to making HBO such a big brand. And I will say that, there were no TV writers in Hollywood who could ever have come up with Sex in the City. Their portrayals of women tended to be, they were written by men and they were pretty cliched, men's ideas of what women should be like, which is something that I do talk a little bit about in my one-woman show, as being, part of the inspiration for writing Sex in the City in the first place, writing about women the way we really are, as opposed to some man's idea of what we should be like. And, that was what really started selling newspapers in the New York Observer, which is where the column Sex and the City first appeared.
And I think it's also a big deal that it was New York, because women in New York are also very different to women anywhere else.
Well,
being a woman in New York is different.
That was really one of the things that I set out to document in the column Sex and the City. And I'd lived in New York since 1977. And I started writing about women in New York pretty much immediately. And I wrote for women's magazines, and I wrote about basically mating and dating rituals, and, you know, where money, power, and sex intersect in a place like New York City. And New York City at that time felt like one of the few places where women could be successful, where women could actually earn enough money so that they could survive on their own. But, you know, even in the 80s, that was iffy. I mean, there are a whole bunch of reasons why Sex and the City came to be. There was a lot of financial things that were happening and social things that were happening that really starting in the early 80s, when women were going to college for one of the first times, not necessarily to get their MRS, which was their misses. They were actually going to college to get a degree. And then in the early 80s, there was a huge influx of women into the workforce.
Yeah.
And this was one of the first times in history. It happened again back in the 1920s when we had the rise of the flapper, which was, you know, this woman was called the flapper, but she was an independent woman who could earn her own money and could therefore control her own sex life. And so this again was a similar situation. You know, part of it has to do with where's the economy? You know, if the economy is really good and men are making a lot of money, then women aren't going to the office so much. They're not working quite as much.
But they have the choice, which is something that didn't exist
in the
much
80s,
before.
there was, you know, we advanced a little bit, feminism advanced a little bit. So in the 80s, there were a lot of women in the workforce, and people didn't really know what to do. What were the rules?
Yeah.
Was there office dating?
Right.
You know, there was the commitment crisis where, you know, all of a sudden men didn't want to make commitments the way they once did. And what happened was in the 90s, in the early 90s, all of those women who had had careers in the 80s still hadn't gotten married and were independent women and were a little bit more successful. And suddenly their sex lives looked a little bit different than what men assumed women's sex lives should look like. And hence, that was Sex and the City.
Yeah, I mean, you've just sketched the whole thing beautifully, and this was your baby. You saw something there and you understood something. You were able to explain it to other people the way you just have now, which hadn't happened before. I mean, a lot has changed since then. I mean, now I think it's 60% of graduates are women.
Yes.
Now there are a lot more women who are deciding to actually opt out of the workforce, even though they are hugely successful. They're like, I'm getting out of here. I don't like this as much. They have the option, though, of staying in.
Well, those women, that happens to be a small percentage of women. Usually the women who went to Ivy League schools have degrees and met a very successful man.
Yeah.
I mean, in amongst the 1%, and this is a bit of an issue and a bit of a problem, but amongst the 1%, less than 5% of that 1% are women who made their own money. Most of the women who are in the 1% are married to a very wealthy man. So the more money a man has, the more sexist that world is. Now, when you go down to the 50%, you'll find that there's a much higher proportion of women who are the breadwinners, and that might even be 50%. So it's it's really very specifically about a small portion of society.
Do you think that women are happier now, or that they were happier in the 90s? And I mean generally, you've got a barometer on this stuff, which is why you can write as beautifully as you can, and you can explain the kinds of feelings that weren't portrayed before you started telling stories like Sex and the City. Do you think that, first of all, I can pretty much guarantee men are not happier than they were in the 90s. I mean, we've got, porn. We got porn, high suicide rates, huge amounts of marital infidelity, and that was always there, so I'm not going to pretend that that's new. But men are undoubtedly more unhappy, and particularly single men are more unhappy than they've ever been.
Are you married?
Do you think that's true for women? No, I'm not married, but
Right.
I happen to be one of the few happily single people. And I'm genuine. I know you
Right.
in your 50s became single again, and it like gave you a new lease on life, which is part of the show as well.
Yes, it did.
Which I want to talk about in a little bit. But do you think men are do you want to disagree with me about men being unhappy? And then what do you think it's done to women? Because the 90s were also a special time. I mean, I think there was a lot of lightness about things.
Yes.
Everything wasn't so heavy and so serious and so consequential and political.
Yes.
That's changed.
Yes, I mean it's changed enormously, and I mean, to me, I think the biggest change overall for everybody is the internet, the cell phone, and social media,
Absolutely.
and pornography is a huge, huge factor, and I mean, there was a feeling in the 90s that, first of all, you did not feel like you were being spied on and tracked. You know, there were no cell phones. You could go out at night. You know, there wasn't this obsession with screens and television.
Yes.
I mean, in New York, I didn't even own a TV, I think, until 1998. And that was only because of Sex and the City. I thought, I got to get a TV because I've got to watch this. But it was really about people were interacting, and real life felt more interesting than, you know, than anything that you would find on TV or on screen. And people had real connections too. And
well, I mean, Candace, like, let's just talk about dating for a second, because that's a big part of what Sex and the City was.
yes.
And it's a big part of being a woman in New York in the 90s. Dating was like, and there was an art to it. There were, first of all, a million places you could go, a million ways you could do dating. It wasn't like, you know, the small town kind of idea of you have to go to the movies or a dance or whatever. And New York in the 90s, dating as a single woman who also might have been the breadwinner, or might have been certainly self-sufficient, was able to stand on her own 2 feet and make her way in New York, buy the things she wanted to buy, didn't need to depend on her dad, her brother, her husband, her boyfriend.
Right.
This-
And I used to feel in the 90s, you know, being a single woman. And in fact, it led to other books that I wrote, like Lipstick Jungle, which was really about the super powerful women I knew in New York who had each other's backs when it came to business, just like the men did. You know, New York was a real woman's town.
Yeah.
And I used to feel in the 90s that being a woman in New York in the 90s was probably one of the best places to be a woman in the world,
and in human history. Right.
In history. I mean, there was so much independence. There was lots of female camaraderie. You felt like you could kind of say, like, you know, bug off to the man in a sense.
Yeah.
And it was a terrific time. And now, I mean,
I think we've gone backwards a little bit, and
yes,
it's partly.
I think so too.
Do you? Okay, because like dating, for example, in New York, and the first time I'd ever been.
Well, let's say dating everywhere, because I conduct my informal surveys, and I've already talked to a couple of women here, and I already know the whole story with dating here, and it's exactly the same as it is in New York and every place else.
But because of swiping left and right, somehow some of the magic's been taken out. That there was an art to this, and especially in a competitive environment like New York, right, where you have a lot of men and a lot of women, and they're trying to meet each other, and there was a way to socially engage, which was a skill. It was something that was learned, especially by those powerful women that you're talking about. They had to operate at a certain level, not just to snare the right guy or to meet the right people, to be friends with the right in crowd. I mean, New York's hugely competitive. It's the center of the world. And now it's all on screens, and it's so like blasé. And frankly, people are sitting around in ugly clothes in their apartment just trying to hook up. It seems a bit depressing to me compared to that. Don't you think?
Well, I don't know if I would quite describe it that way. I think what's missing is the romance of dating is missing. And where you felt like you could go out anywhere and you could meet somebody at the supermarket. You could meet somebody, in line for the movies. You really literally could meet somebody anywhere. So there was that romance. And then there was also, people could make commitments in ways that they don't seem to be able to do now. I mean, there's almost no momentum. And I did write a book called Is There Still Sex in the City? And I did a whole story on Tinder dating. And one of the things that's really the big difference between dating now and dating back in the 80s and the 90s is dating now, people seem to have 90% bad experiences. Whereas dating in the 80s and 90s, yeah, there were a couple of bad experiences, but overall it was pretty good. You actually could meet somebody. There was romance. If things didn't work out, you would feel like, well, it was meant to be. And, we met for a reason and we were in each other's lives for a reason. Oh. Now there seems to be sort of no reason except that I'm going to end up being hurt and I'm going to end up being rejected. There's a lot of rejection. There's a lot of people presenting themselves in an untruthful kind of way. I'm guilty of that, I have to say, on some dating apps. I lie about my age because I have to. But there's also, oddly, a feeling of no time. There's no time to develop a relationship. And I have sometimes I'll have 2 dates in a week. And I've dated people from 25 years old to 91.
Yeah.
I've dated the gnarly 65-year-old and the, maybe once attractive 77-year-old. And, it makes no difference. It still always seems to be like one date. It's sort of like one and done. Wow. And everybody they're moving on to the next.
The consequence, the consistency, the effort being made that was once perhaps part of the deal, right? And it was an adventure.
It's very hard, I think, to find that spark. And I have to say, I'm guilty of it as well. When people say, what are you looking for? It's like, I just want to find somebody I have a connection with.
But isn't this also partly because, and I really didn't want to turn this discussion because you have so much interesting stuff in your head that I want to find out about. But I don't want to just focus on this idea of men and women and relationships and dating, but it's so integral to the way that people feel about their lives, right? You feel good about your life if you have good relationships. And they published a study the other day that longevity is based more on the important relationships you have in your life than your fitness, not drinking too much, smoking too much, doing drugs, all that stuff. It's right at the center of what most people consider to be a purpose and a meaning and a reason to be happy. When you think about these stories of people going on one date and then not seeing each other again, is there a part of it that's about getting to know each other? And now, because of the internet and everything else, there's so much information about everybody that you don't really need to get to know them, because you're going to look at their LinkedIn, their Facebook, their Instagram, and you've seen who they've been with over the last 6 months. You can tell if there was a boyfriend. You could tell if there was a wedding that they went to together. You could tell who her parents are, what they look like. Suddenly there's no mystery.
Well, I think that mystery is highly overrated.
Okay.
So, this whole thing of like, be mysterious. Why? Like, what are you hiding? I mean, usually people who are...
the game of getting to know somebody, not necessarily being mysterious. Let me change that there.
Right.
Because I agree with you. Like if you are purposefully trying to be mysterious, you're a pain in the backside. Who has the time for that, right?
You're probably like a psychopath
right.
or something.
And who wants to play those games incessantly? It's what I'm talking about is that interaction where you first meet somebody and you're like, oh, wow, I'm really intrigued by this person. Now I want to spend time getting the time you were talking about, time getting to know them. And I want by the end of this to have discovered things that both excite me even more about whoever it is, and things that are like weird and wacky and slightly eccentric and different that make them stand out from all the other people I've met in my life.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Well, go ahead. I mean, it's like I'm sitting with my shrink.
Well, first of all, I am definitely guilty of Googling.
Okay.
And my feeling is if you see me on a dating app and you don't Google me, dude, that's dumb, okay? Because and I assume that anybody who connects with me and wants to get together, they've Googled me, and that's fine. I want them to know something about who I am and what I'm about. So I don't actually have a problem with that. I mean, I am guilty of, I will Google people and find out where their house is or their apartment.
In New York, that
and
tells
what
you a
it's
lot,
worth.
right? Yeah, tells you a lot. Sure.
So, and it's just, I mean, to me, it's just information. But, the person in person, I think, supersedes, any of those facts of information in terms of making a connection. So I don't know that it is all those things that you said. It's like LinkedIn and we have so much information. On the other hand, I think that you're right in the sense that there's a lot of junctures where we can say, you know what, not for me.
Yeah. You can climb off easily.
You can, yes, you can climb off really easily. I mean, there was one guy who I liked, quite a bit. He's from New Jersey. I don't know what the equivalent of that is here. It's,
East Strand. Got you.
It's perfectly fine. And there were lots of pictures of, him with his family, a very big extended family.
Right.
And they didn't look that great. And I had to say to myself, do I really want to spend Thanksgiving with these people? Probably not.
So it put you off straight away.
And that put me off. And you know what? That is wrong, Gareth.
But who has the time?
It's wrong.
Okay, but who has the time? So
this guy he's great.
I hear you talking, and again, I'm just reminded of these characters that come from the TV show, right? And there's a bit of Samantha talking to me now. There's a little bit of Carrie. There's a little bit of Charlotte, and there's a little bit of Miranda. And I think probably you have all of those people living in your head all the time. And it's not to say you're a schizophrenic, but it is to say that a lot of people are not just one thing, right?
No, they are not. We all have different elements.
And especially women are governed far more, and it sounds like such a sexist thing, but we know it's true, like by their feeling than men are. Men are like...
Well, darling, that's only until you go through menopause.
Well,
then guess what? When you got no
you get
hormones,
logical as hell.
You are not guided by your feelings. You're just like a man. You're guided by logic.
Cold and dead on the inside.
Men are actually the ones who are much more guided by their hormones. That testosterone is
hormones,
a problem.
Yeah. I'm not going to disagree with you, but you could feel like, what I'm trying to get at is you could feel like Charlotte, you could feel like Miranda, you could feel like Samantha, you could feel like Carrie. On any given day, it could change. Like you could be all four in a space of 24 hours, right?
Yes.
But a lot of the time, those characteristics are all just part of what makes you the person you are, and embracing them and kind of getting comfortable with them is a good thing. I think a lot of women were only given permission to know that they could do that by columns like yours, by the show eventually, by books that have been written since the 80s, 90s, where women have realized, oh, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm allowed to be like Samantha and be this sex machine and just look for the fun and have a good time and be totally emotional if I want to be. And then I can be the more staid, serious, conservative kind of Charlotte character. And I can also be this glamorous, sexy Carrie character. All of those are possible. I don't have to just be the one thing.
Yes, that's true. But I think more important than that is Sex and the City gave women permission to be themselves and to be self-actualized. And, you know, at the beginning, the message of Sex and the City was not about finding a man.
No.
And, you know, for me, my message has always been be your own Mr. Big, because so many women, they're attracted to men who sort of embody a lot of the things that they personally want, but feel like society doesn't allow them to be.
Do you still
which is
think?
ambitious and
do you still think that's
sexual?
a thing?
I think it's less true, but it's still true. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why so many young women are on social media and they're more upset and depressed than we used to be, because there's, the message that women are still getting is, in some ways, men are more valuable than women. Women are kind of secondary, and you have to look a certain way to get a man. But
that's not what the media. Media is just giving us stories about women being independent, being strong. Women have got more role models now than they've ever had.
That is true.
And the way the media
social
portrays,
media, though, they still get that message.
Well, the social media is then the mirror that we're holding up to ourselves. But what I'm getting at is that, the characters in movies, the powerful women who are portrayed as presidents or whatever else, and that is really going on in society to a degree that wasn't before.
100%.
And yet, so many women find themselves exactly the way that you've just described it, kind of less satisfied. And funnily enough, I don't know whether you agree with this or not, but I've seen the statistics about how many women are choosing those traditional roles in spite of having huge material success, being completely independent for a long period in their lives. And they're deciding, actually, you know what, I'd kind of like to just be a stay-at-home mom. There are a lot of women doing that now.
Okay, I don't know anything about those statistics. I haven't seen any of that. I mean, the only statistics that I see that would relate to that are women in the 1%. But I don't think
they're the ones who are setting the agenda for everyone else. And yet they're choosing.
Don't know
they're almost
if
like
they really
choosing
are.
this. They're like choosing this conservative life for themselves, but telling everyone else, like, be yourself, do your thing, you don't need a man, kind of thing. But then in their own lives, they're living a completely different existence.
I actually don't know anything about that. I mean, statistically, there are more and more single women who are parents. And, most women, they kind of have to work. So, I mean, when you have a cohort of men who, most men, they don't make enough money to support a woman staying home and kids.
Yeah, it's expensive.
It's, life's very expensive. I actually think the future is single.
Well, I'm happy with that because I'm single.
I mean, that's,
and
I think that there are more and more single people. There will be, and the future's probably more and more child free.
But that means,
which to me is not a problem because I think there are too many people anyway.
But don't you think that means extinction?
No, I do not think it means extinction.
I mean, if we're not producing children, and I'm exempting you and I from this because we're clearly not in that position. If we're not producing children at replacement value, we have a society that's in decline because who's going to be paying for all those old people? You don't think that's true?
I think that is a very male pyramid scheme kind of thinking.
It's just mathematics. Like who's going to be earning the money to pay for all these people and pensions in 50 years' time, 30 years' time?
Well, I think maybe people have to make their own money to save up for pensions. And, maybe if you don't have to spend so much money on kids going to college, et cetera, maybe you'll save up that money. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at this. But let's face it, I mean, billions and billions of people, we are destroying the earth. So we are quickly, by reproducing endlessly here, headed for sure extinction. That's what I think. I mean, this is a philosophical discussion, obviously, and we disagree.
No, but I'm curious about this because we have big families here in Africa, right? People have a lot of kids. But we're responsible for, 3% of the pollution in the world. So it's not us. So who is it? I mean, is it people who have,
It's the billionaires.
Is it the billionaires with their jets, or is it us in our economy class seats going to Europe for the one holiday a year? I mean, I don't know if that's right. I just think a lot of this stuff we're told it'll make us happier, but I think there are a lot of people who are much less happy when they don't have kids and they get to a certain age and they think, well, what am I doing all of this for? Like, what's the legacy? And people like you and I, we're proud of our work, obviously. I mean, you more than anyone, you've done these incredible things, and you've added to, we talk about philosophy. I mean, you've created like a branch of philosophy here, if you want to be academic about it, which has become more than entertainment for some people. But in the end, there are people, not necessarily you, who will say, for what? Like, what's the point of making money, for example, if you aren't going to spend it on your kids? Like, what's the point of having two jobs?
I know. I mean, these are the existential questions that people have to answer, for themselves.
And you would write about this for your characters.
But the reality is 86% of women are mothers. So we're not really in danger of women not having kids. That's the reality.
Okay, so then would you hazard a guess that 86% of women who are mothers are happier than the other part of that 100% who are not? Or do you think they're equally happy?
No.
You don't think there's a relationship?
Well, they've done a lot of studies, and the happiest women are single women, believe it or not. And that has been traditionally true for a very long time. And the unhappiest women are married women with kids. So
okay. I mean, when it comes to writing,
and the unhappiest men are single men, and the happiest men are married men.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't disagree with you. I've seen a lot of unhappy marriages, and I've always thought it's better to be happily single than to be unhappily married or divorced. Right?
Yes. I suppose so.
And if you haven't had kids, you haven't hurt other people along the way, which I think is quite like, that's a non-egotistical way to go through life. If you're going to do something where you harm, the idea of the Hippocratic Oath and do no harm, right?
Right.
I mean, that's a good way to go. So when you think about these things now, because you do, I mean, this is part of what you wrote the columns for, and the fact that you still asked, is there still sex in the city? I just wonder if young women and young men today have any idea of how to have that kind of meaningful connection that we used to have. Because being single in and of itself is fine, especially if you're getting enough stimulation from friends, you have a great family, you have interesting on and off relationships or hookups or whatever. But I don't know if that's enough for some people. It's not for everyone, but for some people it may just be.
Yes, I think you're right. But again, I mean, I'm thinking, you know, it's probably quite a luxury that we can sit here and have this discussion, because, you know, for thousands and thousands of years, you know, so much about human existence was survival. And, you know, I think that that's something that we all now kind of have in the back of our heads with, you know, climate change and all of this. I mean, it's, you know, in pretty much the blink of an eye, we can go from having a fairly cushy life to really being in a situation where, you know, we need to survive. And I think that's something that, you know, we may be seeing more and more in the future. So, I mean, in terms of finding meaning in your life, you know, forever they've had kids and they've been married, and, you know, those people get to the end of their lives and wonder, what the hell was it for? You know, so having kids and being married is not really any guarantee
Of happiness.
that,
Yeah.
you know, of happiness in the end. I mean, you can easily feel like you could have done something really important, but, you know, being married and having kids stood in the way of that. So, you know, there are trade-offs on both sides.
Well, what do you think of, and this is also, I mean, something controversial that people don't always want to get into, but the fact that women up to very recently, you couldn't be a single woman. Like if you were, there was something
one
wrong.
of the things that you've had. Well, I mean, you couldn't be a single person. That's one of the huge changes, that technology.
But especially as a woman, because there were always men who kind of could find camaraderie with other guys and still have sex with women or have relationships of some kind and not necessarily marry. Marriage is a social, you know, convention. But women, you'd have to be a nun. You'd be burnt at the stake as a witch. You were the old widow in the town who kind of, you know, never got married. There was always some, like, there was a negative attachment to women being single in the past, which I don't think there was necessarily for men. Until recently.
Maybe not, but, you know, I think one of the reasons why it was very hard for women to be single was that you couldn't earn money. I mean, you know, all of these things really come down to the income stream and who has access to the income stream. And traditionally, women have only been able to have access to the income stream through men, either by being married, you know, taking, you know, having a father that supports them, or, you know, the oldest profession in the world.
Yeah.
So, you know, it wasn't like, hey, a woman could go and be a banker. So, I mean, that's one of the huge changes, is access to the income stream. And, you know, the other change is, you know, I mean, 100 years ago, you know, you couldn't really, you know, there was no soup for one.
Yeah.
You couldn't really go to the store and, you know, buy food for one person. I mean, even now that's hard to do. And I wish that they would make things in smaller portions.
I don't want to cook just for me. It's terrible. You know?
Sometimes I do cook just for me because I like to cook. But, you know, again, I think because of technology, and technology tends to only go in one direction, whether we like it or not. And, in the future, there are going to be more and more single people, more and more single and child-free
Absolutely.
people.
Absolutely. I mean, that's already the trend in places like America, where it seems that this is absolutely going to happen, whether we like it or not. And that's also something like technology goes in a direction. I think it's really cool to kind of get an idea of the sorts of things that you used to write about that you think are still going on and the things that have changed quite a lot, not just for women or relationships, but even in places like New York. I mean, I certainly feel like the first couple of times I was in New York, maybe just because it was new to me, and you moved there with what, like $20 in your pocket?
Yes.
Once upon a time. It was the most exciting place in the world.
Yes.
And somehow the last 2 or 3 times, look, don't get me wrong, I still love New York, but it just feels like, and change is inevitable, they say. Someone who went there for the first time in the 70s would have told you it was dangerous and all the rest of it. In the 80s, maybe a different vibe. In the 90s, again, the kind of stories that came out of Sex and the City. And now, how do you feel about someone in New York? How do you feel about that?
I ask myself this question all the time, and I think everybody asks themselves this question. Is it because one is older?
Yeah, because you have different experiences, different ages.
So you have different, experiences, and you look at the world a different way. Or is it true that the city has in some way changed and it isn't quite as exciting? And, the reality is that if you are sort of looking for that excitement, it's still there. I go out, I do the fashion scene, I do the fashion shows, and, there are lots of young people, there are lots of really interesting people, and people are in some ways more colorful and expressive of themselves than they ever have been. It's, men are wearing jewelry and skirts and high heels. And, there's just such a huge variety of people expressing themselves, and they're still passionate and they're still interesting. But one does have to look for it a little bit.
Right.
I would say. It's maybe a little bit more of an insider kind of situation. But, those clubs are still there. The late night clubs are still there.
You saw the original.
Drugs are still there.
You saw the original Studio 54, right?
Yes.
Wow. I mean, just tell me about that.
It was, that's probably the only time where I've ever felt like you are 100% in the right place at the right time in the whole world. It really was that feeling. And it was so buzzy, and, there was glitter all everywhere on the floor, and you would enter, and there was just the pounding disco music that was supposedly set at the heartbeat. And it was just so physically exciting.
Wow.
And in a way, it just really, it was almost a condensed version of the city itself that was very exciting.
You really speak very openly, you've even done it today, about your own dating experiences, which I think is brave, and it gives other people an opportunity to kind of compare their own lives and go, okay, well, either she's being so honest about this, and it's not always like glamorous stories. Sometimes it's embarrassing. It doesn't always work out, but you're very honest and open about it. You said you also have been on dates with like 25-year-olds and 90-year-olds.
Yes.
Do you think you have a type, or have you learned like how to short circuit this to get what you want? Make it work for you? Is there a trick to it? There are probably women listening to this, and guys, frankly, who are thinking, how do I get better at this? Because you sound like you're a pro. I mean, like you really know your stuff, And even though you're happy to admit the failures, you also have successes.
Well, I mean, my attitude is, I mean, first of all, I don't know if I'm, and I have to be honest with myself, I don't know if I'm really looking for somebody. It's like
Is it just amusement?
I have my own house and I have my own apartment. It's like I have my own stuff. I have a car.
Sure.
I have a couple of dogs. I mean, I would love to have that, that deep connection with somebody. And I do look at people who have been married for a long time, and I just think, geez, don't get divorced. I mean, this is really my advice.
Yeah.
If you are in your 50s and you've been married to somebody for 20 years, don't get divorced. Right. Make it work, because there really isn't anything so better out there. I mean, there are a few exceptions where, people
honest.
meet somebody and this and that, but it's like, it's very hard to recreate that 20 years of experience, of knowing somebody. I find people interesting. And that's maybe one of the issues. My attitude is sort of like, hey, you never know.
But it does.
And so that's why I go out with all these different people.
But it sounds great to me. I mean, it sounds like you're really you're enjoying life. You're amusing yourself. And I don't mean that in some, derogatory manner that the men that you're dating are just playthings to you, but you're amusing yourself. You're having a good time. You're living, as the millennials and Gen Z kids call it, your best life, right?
I suppose so. I mean, I could sit at home and I could watch TV, or I can go out and have a conversation with somebody, which is always interesting. I just find people interesting.
Do you change it up if it's someone in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and if it's someone in their 50s, 60s, 70s?
Well, this is definitely one of the differences. If it's somebody in their 20s, 30s, 40s, they spend a lot more time asking questions about you. And if they're in their 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s, it's a monologue about them. I mean, I have gone out with some of these men, and I'll be like, they didn't ask me one question about me. Now, some women get really upset about that. My feeling is, oh, you know what? That's great. I got to sit there, had a couple glasses of champagne. They talked, and I didn't have to make a ton of effort to amuse them. But that's really one of the big differences. And in fact, in a way, the younger they are, the more interested in the minutia of what's your favorite color, or what's your favorite band.
Oh,
now, nobody who's 80 is going to ask you what your favorite band is.
No.
So that's one of the big differences. If you're younger, you're still interested in all those details. And then for me, it's like, oh gosh, I remember this was really fun.
Right.
Telling people all of that little minutia.
So what about men who are very successful versus men who are not? Because I'm sure that you've dated guys who are, they're fun, they're good looking, they're young, they've got energy.
Men
they're curious
who are very
about
successful, they don't want anybody to disagree with them.
Really? That's the number one overriding thing. And what is
yes. I mean, if you a billionaire, this is the thing about very successful men and billionaires.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what they've done that is morally repugnant. For instance, I'm talking about hedge funders who, buy up every small house in a neighborhood and destroy businesses, etc. If you challenge them on that, they get really pissed off and they truly believe that they are doing good. This is one of the things that I've found that is quite disturbing. And people are often very, very rich because of less than savory moral and financial practices. But boy, if you point that out to them, they are furious. They truly believe that they are doing great good in the world.
And conversely, is there something that guys could do that is always a winner? Is there something that you've always been impressed with? Maybe it's the way he treats the staff. Maybe it's the compliments he gives people. Maybe it's just like a genuine kind of friendliness and curiosity that you were talking about earlier.
It's like somehow deep down, like being a decent, nice person, I think helps. And, being critical and judgmental is not so great.
Ugly. Well, one of my ex-girlfriends always used to say 2 things are non-negotiable to her. And I don't know whether I have these or not because she's an ex. So kindness and generosity. She said, if you've got those 2, all the other stuff can be worked out. And I think maybe a third is a sense of humor, because you have to, you can't take life too seriously, right?
That's true. Yes. A sense of humor is wonderful.
I think if you've got those 3 things, we're off to a good start.
Absolutely.
All right. So New York is probably one of the most exciting places in the whole world to live and to date and to meet people, because you never know. You could meet just about anybody. You've met loads of really famous, important, interesting, powerful, influential, rich people. And that happens in New York all the time. You could go out for a coffee somewhere and end up in the line next to a, Oscar-winning actor. It happens. It doesn't happen so much anymore.
I have to say that happens a lot less. I mean, that's one of the things that's different about New York, is that it used to people used to feel a little bit, everybody was a little bit more in the mix.
Yeah.
And now it's a little bit, it's sort of like people have gone to their corners. It's like famous people really only hang out with other famous people. It's a very stratified society, and it's become more so, I would say.
And New York there's a class structure in New York.
There's a real pecking order.
If you live on the Upper East Side, it means this about you. If you live on the Upper West Side, it means this.
Yes, and people are always judging the minutia of people's lives.
But there are some incredible lives being lived there. I mean, there are old ladies who are living in apartments on, Central Park South, that have been there for 60, 70 years and who've seen it all. And they have like their dogs or whatever it is, and they live these lives which most of us will never know about. But when you knock behind certain doors in New York, you just meet these extraordinary people.
That is definitely true. You know, all of those apartments, you never know who's going to be behind those doors.
Wow. And those apartments are something else.
Tiny.
Well, I don't know. Some of them are pretty glamorous. I mean, there's some of those buildings that have been around since 1920s, and they are palatial inside. There are a few of them left.
Obviously, you are traveling much tonier circles than I do, Gareth.
I don't know. I mean, there's that, and then there's friends of mine. So I've got friends in New York, some who live that way. And I've got other friends in New York who really are squeezed into a smaller apartment than this studio, and that's the kitchen, the bedroom, the closet, the bathroom, everything. And, you've got to make it in New York, so it's tough, but everybody works their backsides off, and it's a serious place, too.
Oh, yes. And people work hard.
Oh,
definitely.
Absolutely. And they want to live in Manhattan, but your rents are so high that it's like outrageous.
About $5,000 a month, I think, is about average for Manhattan.
And then everything, just living there is expensive. Like the shops are expensive, the restaurants, everything, right?
The restaurants are so expensive. It's really, I mean, even the wealthiest people are complaining. And, once those prices go up, they're not going down.
No.
So.
And I keep thinking back to Sex and the City because
it was more affordable, definitely.
It was, but you did a huge marketing job for New York there. I mean, you should be given the freedom of the city because I think you created a sexiness about the place that made it seem accessible and that made a lot of people want to live there. I think there are probably a lot of particularly girls who went to live in New York because they saw that and they thought, that's the life for me.
Yes. Unfortunately, the TV show made it seem much more accessible than it is. And that's why I say to people, read the book. The book is much darker and the book is the reality.
Well, let's just talk about your show. So you said that you go into, talking about some of the behind the scenes stuff when it comes to Sex and the City, but you've got so much material. You talked about the lipstick jungle, for example, Killing Monica, Four Blondes. There's so many works here that you could talk about. And I don't think it's difficult for you to stand up there and entertain a crowd. This is what you've been doing your whole life long. But it's pretty amazing that it still comes down to like love, a pair of heels, a good group of friends, the sort of things that make people happy when they watch the show, when they read the book, are still the things that make people happy when you're telling them stories in the one-man show. So what do you not do? What do you not tell them? What kinds of stuff do you not go into? Because those are the things that either they're not going to find entertaining or that you think are maybe a bit too dark. Like you said, the book is dark just now.
Well, I mean, originally the show was much longer. It was actually 2 hours when I first started developing it at Bucks County Playhouse, which is quite a storied playhouse in Pennsylvania outside of the city. And it was 2 hours, and there was, I think in it I talked about my mother dying, and some more of the failures in my life, which ended up, as time went on, some of those things got cut out. And interestingly, the audience doesn't miss that. So I don't know. I mean, also there's a certain momentum to these things, and, you want to just keep the show going. So if there's anything that sort of doesn't fit in, then that got cut out. But I think the show is about an hour and 25 minutes, and it moves along at a pretty good clip. And I've had, I've had a lot of men come to see the show who loved it and said that, they thought they went in, not knowing what to expect, and they thought that they were going to be really bored, and they were riveted the whole time. So there you go. And you'll have to come, Gareth.
I will. And one of the things that maybe you'll tell us is whether or not there was a Mr. Big for you.
That is definitely part of the show. Was there a real Mr. Big? And I tell the real story of the real Mr. Big.
And it wasn't Matthew McConaughey.
No, it was not Matthew McConaughey. No.
Well, listen, I just love talking to you. I really could talk to you for hours because you seem like the kind of person who would be fun to go on a date with, be fun to have a coffee with, be fun to gossip with and to laugh with. And I'm sure you have real life friends who are way more exciting. You had to change the names. You probably had to leave out some of the stuff because you do meet people like this in New York, and they really are characters. You're a character, for heaven's sake.
Yes.
I'm just blown away at how much, at how prodigious you've been in your life, and you're not stopping anytime soon.
No, I have a couple of other things in the works that it's a little too soon to talk about.
That's okay. I'm not gonna draw it out of you. So if you want to see Candace doing her show live, go to showtime.co.za, ticketmaster.co.za. She's in Johannesburg this weekend, Saturday the 23rd of September, and in Cape Town, Saturday the 30th of September. The 2 shows. Book them now. You don't want to end up standing outside in your heels. Is that right?
And wear your Manolos. No, wear your heels. They don't have to be Manolos.
What you did for fashion, I mean, that's a whole other story that we don't. I mean, I'm in no position to start talking about fashion, but I know we could.
Yeah, we could.
We could. Candace, it's such a pleasure to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth.